Okay, today we're going to look at the inverse and identity properties. And if that sounds familiar, it should. We did them in the last chapter. Alright, additive inverses, also known as opposites. What's the opposite of negative 4/5? Well, how about positive 4/5? And when you add those two together, you know what you get? What's your sum? 0, because they cancel each other out. Now if we had 2/3, what's the opposite of 2/3? How about negative 2/3? And if we add those two numbers together, we get 0, because they're opposites. Now let's look at the multiplicative inverse. So it's kind of like an opposite, but not really opposite. It's the reciprocal. So what do we do with negative 4/5 if we want its reciprocal? Well, we're going to multiply it by negative 5/4. Our goal is to get an answer of 1. So if we multiply negative 4/5 times negative 5/4, if you want to do some factoring out, you can do that. Or you could just multiply it and get negative 20 over 20. In this case, we have a negative times a negative, so our answer is positive, and it's going to be positive 1. Okay, let's look at our next one, 4 2/3. How do I do reciprocal on that? My first bet is to change that into an improper fraction. So I'm going to do 4 times 3 and get 12, plus the other 2 would be 14/3, because 4 2/3 is equal to 14/3. Then I'm going to multiply it by its reciprocal. I'm simply flipping the numerator and the denominator. And when I multiply those together, I can either multiply them straight together, and I will get, let's see, 14 times 3 is 42/42, which is 1. Or if you want to just simply factor out ahead of time, you can also get 1. So we're looking at reciprocals. The multiplicative inverse is really kind of a fancy word for reciprocal. Additive identity. What can we add to negative 4/5 and it still is negative 4/5? How about we add 0 and we still get negative 4/5? In this case, how about we add 0 to 4 2/3 and guess what we get? 4 2/3. That's it? That's all you're doing? Yes, that's all we're doing. Now multiplicative identity, what can we multiply times each fraction to get the same fraction? Well, what's negative 4/5 times 1? What's negative 4/5? I'm going to give you a hint though. They may disguise this. They might put negative 4/5 times 5/5. Well, you'll still end up with negative 20/25, which simplifies to negative 4/5. So basically, multiplicative identity is multiplying by 1. So if I multiply by 1, in this case I'll get 2/3. That's an example of multiplicative identity. Now let's talk about the 0 property of multiplication. What happens if we multiply a number times 0? That's right, you get 0. No matter what the number is, you're still going to get 0. That's called the 0 property of multiplication. There's no such thing as the 0 property of addition. Don't you forget that.